The restaurant has no name on the door. That is the first thing people notice, if they are allowed inside at all. The absence of any sign, any welcome, any suggestion that the space behind the black lacquered entrance belongs to anyone who simply wants a meal. It doesn't. The top floor of the Sterling in Manhattan exists for one purpose only, because Sung Ho Park needs a place to conduct business that cannot be conducted anywhere else. Tonight, 4 men sit across from him at a table that seats 12. They are CFOs and chairmen of companies whose names appear on buildings across 3 states. They have lawyers on retainer, bodyguards in the lobby downstairs, and enough capital between them to reshape a small country. And every single one of them is afraid. Not visibly. That is the thing about fear in rooms like this. It doesn't look like shaking hands or darting eyes. It looks like stillness. Men who don't reach for their water glasses without thinking twice. Men who wait for him to speak before they adjust in their chairs. Men who laugh exactly when the permission to laugh arrives, which it has not once tonight. Sung Ho is 29. He took control of the park organization at 24. After his father's stroke left the empire in freefall, and every rival family in New York assumed the vacuum was theirs to fill. They were wrong. It took him 6 months to stabilize and 3 more to expand. Now the name Park doesn't belong to a man. It belongs to a warning. He sits at the head of the table in a charcoal suit, elbows resting lightly on the arms of his chair, watching the lead negotiator from Pacific Meridian Holdings explain why $40 million represents a fair valuation for the shipping corridor Sung Ho intends to acquire. The man has been talking for 11 minutes. Sung Ho has not moved. He doesn't need to. In this room, silence is its own kind of pressure, and he has always been fluent in it. The deal is already decided in his mind. These men simply don't know it yet. They'll leave tonight believing they negotiated something, because that version of events keeps people cooperative long-term. Sung Ho gave up needing to be seen winning years ago. He only needs to win. Daniel Kwan, seated to his right, refills his own water glass without asking. A deliberate informality, his way of signaling to the men across the table that not everyone here is afraid. Just them. Then the service door opens. A woman steps through carrying the wrong wine. She is not the usual staff. She moves differently, not performing composure, actually possessing it. She sets the bottle on the sideboard, reads the table, and understands the mistake in the space of a single breath. The 4 men across the table go perfectly still. Sung Ho doesn't turn. He waits 1 full second, the way a man waits who has never once needed to rush, and then he looks. Every person in the room understands what this moment is. A wrong bottle of wine in a private session like this one is not a small error. It is a disruption of an environment that Sung Ho Park controls down to the temperature of the room and the weight of the crystal on the table. The staff at the Sterling have been briefed, trained, and briefed again. New personnel do not enter this floor unescorted during a session. Whoever allowed this to happen will answer for it. That is not a question. It is the natural order of things. Zara Mitchell does not know any of this. She knows she grabbed the wrong bottle from the service cart because the handwriting on the order ticket looked like a 7, but was almost certainly a 1. She knows the room she just walked into has a quality she cannot immediately name. Not silence exactly, but something denser than silence. The kind of atmospheric pressure that tells you something important was already happening before you arrived. She knows the man at the head of the table is looking at her now. She looks back. His eyes are dark and completely still, the kind of still that isn't calm, but has learned to wear calm's face. He is younger than she expected from the quality of everything around him. There is a small scar cutting through his left brow, barely visible, easy to miss. She doesn't miss it. "I apologize," she says, and her voice does not waver. "I'll have the correct bottle out in under 2 minutes. Would you prefer to wait, or should I clear the settings and reset when I return?" The question is professional, practical, the kind of question a person asks when they are focused on solving a problem rather than managing their own fear. She isn't performing calm either. She genuinely wants to know how he'd like to proceed. No one speaks for a moment. Sung Ho has been apologized to thousands of times. by men who fear what comes after the apology, by people performing remorse like an audition. He has never once been asked, immediately, without anxiety, what he would actually prefer. Like he is a customer. Like he is simply a person sitting at a table. Wait, he says. The word comes out a half-beat slower than he intends. Zara nods once, professional and unhurried, and exits through the service door. The room exhales. The negotiator from Pacific Meridian clears his throat and attempts to resume. Sung-ho does not look at him. He is looking at the door she just walked through. Daniel leans 2 inches closer and says, voice low enough that only Sung-ho can hear, should I have her removed after the session? The floor manager will want to know how you'd like it handled. Sung-ho is quiet for so long that Daniel begins to wonder if he heard the question. Then he says, no, just that. Nothing else. And the way he says it tells Daniel the conversation is over, even though neither of them can explain exactly why. He doesn't ask for the file until 2 in the morning. That detail matters to him later. The 2 hours he spent after the dinner finishing the deal, shaking hands with men whose names he'll never actually care about, riding down 40 floors in the private elevator, sitting in the back of the car while Manhattan moved past the window in long blurs of light. 2 hours in which he told himself he was simply finishing his night, not thinking about a woman who walked into a room wrong and left without crawling. He asks for the file at 2 in the morning, and it arrives in his inbox by 2:15, because the people who work for him understand that promptness is not a preference. Her name is Zara Mitchell, 25 years old, originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Current address, a 1-bedroom apartment in the Flatbush neighborhood of Brooklyn that she shares with 1 roommate. Employment history across the last 3 years lists 4 jobs running simultaneously at peak, currently 3. The Sterling on a part-time contract basis, a morning shift at a physical therapy clinic as a patient intake coordinator, and a weekend position at a home health agency doing overnight care for elderly patients. She is also enrolled part-time in the nursing program at CUNY, currently in her 3rd year. Sung-ho reads this and sets his phone down. He picks it up again. He has read files on rival lieutenants, on politicians whose cooperation he required, on businessmen whose companies he intended to acquire. Those files read like balance sheets, assets, liabilities, leverage points. This file reads like an accounting of everything a person can carry without breaking. 3 jobs. School. And there it is, near the bottom. A recurring wire transfer of $800 per month to an account in College Park, Georgia, flagged during background verification because consistent large transfers pattern like criminal activity before they pattern like a daughter paying her father's medical bills. Her father had an industrial accident 14 months ago. His employer's insurance settled for less than the surgery's cost. Zara moved the gap herself, without being asked, without stopping. Sung-ho reads the file twice. The second time more slowly, the way you read something when the first pass didn't fully land. The city outside his penthouse window is quiet in the way New York is only quiet between 3 and 5 in the morning. Not truly silent, but pretending at it. He thinks about a woman who walked into the wrong room, made eye contact with the most dangerous man in it, and asked him a practical question. He thinks about $800 every month, without fail. He closes the file. He does not sleep, and he does not examine too closely why, for the first time in years, his penthouse feels like it belongs to someone he no longer wants to be. In the morning, he will have to make a decision. He has not yet decided what it is. He comes back on a Wednesday. Zara is midsection when she sees him. A foretop near the window, a business lunch, no one she needs to be particularly careful around. She is carrying 2 plates of the halibut special when the private elevator opens and Sung-ho Park walks out alone, no Daniel Kwan, no visible security, and crosses to the host's stand. He says something quiet. The host nods and gestures toward the window seating. Her section. Zara delivers the halibut. She straightens her apron. She walks over. Good afternoon. Can I start you with something to drink? He looks up. He looks at her the way people look at things they have been thinking about, with a recognition that goes slightly past the moment. Water, he says. and whatever you'd recommend off the menu. No one has ever said that to her at the Sterling. People at the Sterling know exactly what they want before they arrive, and they want it confirmed, not suggested. The branzino, she says. They're doing it with a tomato broth today that's better than anything on the printed menu. Then that, he says. She brings the water. She brings the branzino when it is ready. She checks in once, which is correct for this room, and otherwise gives him the space every Sterling guest expects. He eats slowly. He doesn't look at his phone once. He sits the way a person sits when they have nowhere to be, which she suspects is a lie, but it's his lie to tell. He stays for 2 hours. He orders a single espresso after the meal and nurses it for 40 minutes. When she sets the check down, he looks at it briefly, places a card on top, and says, "The branzino recommendation was right." "It usually is," Zara says. Something that almost becomes a smile crosses his face. She collects the card, runs it, returns it. He signs. He leaves. She picks up the check holder and opens it. Tip it 30%, generous for the Sterling, but not remarkable. And then, on the blank line beneath the total, in handwriting that is careful and slightly formal. Same time next week? Not a question mark. Not a number. Just that. Zara stands at the service station and reads it twice. Then she walks to the back where Priya is restocking glassware and says, without preamble, "He'll be back Wednesday." "Who?" Priya asks. "The man at table 7. "How do you know?" Zara folds the receipt and tucks it into her apron pocket and picks up her tray. "Because he already asked," she says. She is right. She just doesn't know yet that being right is only the beginning, and that what is moving toward her on the next Wednesday and the one after that is something she doesn't have a category for yet. He comes back the following Wednesday and the one after that. By the 3rd week, the host stops pretending to check availability before seating him at table 7, and Priya stops asking who Zara is looking at when her attention drifts briefly toward the elevator. The conversations are short and don't reach anywhere personal, but they reach somewhere. He asks about the nursing program. She asks why someone who clearly owns the restaurant eats alone. He says he doesn't own the restaurant. She says, "The staff moves differently when you walk in. Someone owns it." He doesn't confirm or deny. He drinks his espresso and watches her work. The 4th Wednesday is when it happens. A man at table 3 has been drinking since noon. He is in finance, celebrating something, the kind of celebrating that requires an audience and turns ugly when one isn't cooperative enough. By 2 o'clock, he has sent his food back twice for reasons that have nothing to do with the food. By 2:15, he has made a comment to his companion about the service loud enough to carry to surrounding tables. By 2:30, he grabs Zara's wrist as she reaches to clear his plate. Not hard, but deliberately, the way certain men do when they want to establish the difference in your positions. Sung-ho sees it from table 7. He sets his espresso cup down without a sound. His security, one man positioned near the elevator who Sung-ho assumed was invisible to the room, takes a single step forward. Zara's free hand closes over the man's fingers and removes them from her wrist with the smooth efficiency of someone who has done this before. Not combatively, not performing outrage. Just removing an unwanted thing from her person the way you remove something that doesn't belong there. Then she leans down to the man's eye level and says something that no one at any surrounding table can hear. The man nods. He sits back. He does not speak again for the remainder of his meal. She straightens and continues clearing the table. Sung-ho doesn't move for a long moment. He has watched men under pressure his entire life, watched them escalate, freeze, calculate, collapse. He has almost never watched someone de-escalate the way Zara just did, with no performance afterward, no visible tremor, no lingering anger taking up space in her expression. She is not brave because she doesn't recognize danger. She is brave because somewhere along the way she made a decision about what she would and would not accept, and that decision runs so deep it doesn't require thought anymore. When she comes to clear his table, he is already standing. "Whatever you said to him," Sung-ho says quietly. "It worked. I told him his card had been flagged by our system, and we'd need him to come to the host's stand to verify it, Zara says. He didn't want a scene in front of his company. That wasn't true, Sung-ho says. No, she agrees. But he didn't know that. She picks up his espresso cup. He watches her hands, steady as anything. And he realizes he has spent years surrounded by power that requires other people to be afraid of it. And he is standing across a cleared table from a woman who just demonstrated a completely different kind. He will come back next Wednesday. He already knows that. What he doesn't know is that next Wednesday is the one where everything changes. Not for him, but because of what she says to him, which he will hear for the rest of his life. He asks on a Wednesday, as she is closing out his table. Dinner, he says. After your shift. There's a restaurant on Vestry Street that does a tasting menu worth the drive. I'd like to take you. Zara finishes collecting the silverware. She sets it on her tray. She straightens up and looks at him the way she has looked at him every Wednesday for a month, directly, without performance, measuring something that isn't visible from the outside. No, she says. He blinks. It is a small movement, but she catches it. She suspects that word arrives in his life far less often than it should. I've said something wrong, he says. You've said nothing wrong. The answer is still no. He is quiet for a moment. In the time she has known him, she has learned to read his silences. There are ones that are tactical and ones that are genuine. This one is genuine. He is actually thinking. Tell me why, he says. Not demanding it. Actually asking. Zara tilts her head slightly. You don't know how to talk to people who aren't afraid of you, she says. I've watched you for 4 weeks. You say the right things, and you're never unkind. But everything you do is calibrated for an audience that expects to be managed. Dinner with me would be the same thing. And I don't want to be managed. He says nothing. That's not an insult, she adds. It's an observation. She picks up her tray and walks back to the service station. When she looks up 10 minutes later, he is gone. She doesn't feel good about it, which surprises her, but she doesn't feel wrong either. She goes home. She finishes 3 chapters of her nursing textbook, sends the $800 to her mother to cover her father's physical therapy, and falls asleep at midnight. He comes back Thursday. Not Wednesday. Thursday, which is not his day, which means he thought about it overnight and came back anyway. He sits at table 7 and waits for her section rotation, and when she arrives to take his order, he looks up and says 2 words. Teach me. Just that. No preamble. No charm wrapped around it. Teach you what, Zara says. How to talk to someone who isn't afraid of me. She looks at him for a long time. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't soften the ask with qualification. He just waits, the way a person waits when they have decided to mean something they've said. Every practical part of her is already composing the word no. It forms behind her teeth. She opens her mouth. What comes out instead is, order the branzino, and I'll think about it. She is already walking back to the service station before she can decide if that was brave or expensive. Behind her, for the first time and longer than he can remember, Sung-ho Park is smiling like he actually means it, and the woman who caused it has no idea that somewhere in a rival family's network, a single photograph just changed hands. It starts at the end of a Thursday shift, for weeks after she said think about it, and then spent the following days questioning what she meant. They walk. Not to Vestry Street. Not anywhere orchestrated. Just out the service entrance and down into the strip of Manhattan that exists between the restaurant district and the river, where foot traffic thins and the city allows a small amount of breathing room. He buys coffee from a cart on the corner. She holds her cup with both hands because October arrived fast this year, and the air has teeth. I knew who you were before you came back the first Wednesday, she says. Priya told me. I looked you up. He doesn't tense. And serve me anyway. I serve everyone who sits in my section. She pauses. But I also walked home past the youth center on 34th that night and looked up the foundation name on the sign outside. The logo matched the lapel pin on your jacket from the dinner. He looks at her. You checked. I wanted to understand the contradiction. Men who run what you run don't usually fund after-school programming in neighborhoods their business has never touched. So either it's a tax structure or it's something else entirely. What did you decide? I decided to wait and see who you were on the Wednesdays when nothing was at stake. He is quiet for a while after that. The river is visible at the end of the block, dark and moving. He tells her the things he has never said to anyone outside the organization in plain language. Not confessing, exactly, but accounting. His father. The inheritance he didn't choose. The things he has done to keep people alive who depended on him, and the cost of those things, stacked up like a bill he keeps paying and cannot clear. The youth center, and the 3 others in development, and the fact that his father's council calls it wasted resources, and he has stopped caring what they call it. She listens the way she does everything, fully, without flinching, without performing her reaction for him. I'm not going to tell you it cancels out, she says when he finishes. I know, but I've watched you sit alone at a table full of people for 2 months. She wraps her hands tighter around the cup. And I think you're trying. Not for anyone else. For yourself. That's different. He turns to look at her, and his face does something she hasn't seen it do before. It opens, not all at once, but enough. The stillness he carries changes quality. It becomes the stillness of a person being seen accurately for the first time in years and not yet knowing what to do with it. Zara, he says. Her name in his voice is careful, like he is learning the weight of it. Don't make it into something dramatic, she says. But she isn't quite looking at him when she says it. The city moves around them, indifferent and constant. She finishes her coffee. He doesn't ask where this goes from here. She doesn't offer. But when they reach the corner where she usually turns toward the subway, she stops, and he stops, and neither of them says goodbye for a long time. Neither of them has any idea that 3 blocks away, a man with a camera just sent a file to someone who will not be pleased. The photographs arrive on a Tuesday. They land on Chairman Jin's desk by way of a courier who is paid not to ask questions and has no idea what is inside the envelope. Chairman Jin is 71 years old and has run the Park Council, the governing body of 11 aligned Korean families in New York and New Jersey, for the better part of 3 decades. He watched Sung-ho's father build an empire and watched Sung-ho take it over with a precision that earned, if not warmth, at minimum respect. What he is looking at now does not earn respect. He summoned Sung-ho that evening. Not a request. A summons, which is a distinction Sung-ho stopped honoring 2 years ago. But he comes tonight because he already knows what this is. Daniel flagged the envelope's existence through a council contact 40 minutes before it arrived. The meeting is in the council house in Englewood, New Jersey, a brick colonial that functions as a war room. Chairman Jin sits at the head of a long table with 5 other men. The photographs are spread across the surface. Sung-ho does not sit down. A waitress, Chairman Jin says. The way he says it is the way you describe a structural defect in a building. Her name is Zara Mitchell, Sung-ho says. I know her name. I know where she works, where she lives, where her father receives physical therapy in College Park, Georgia. That is precisely the problem. Chairman Jin folds his hands. Someone went to the trouble of building a file. That file now exists outside this organization, which means it can be used by people who are not us, people with far less patience. The threat is elegant, which is what makes it devastating. Chairman Jin is not saying we will hurt her. He is saying someone will, and we cannot stop it if you make yourself a liability. The distinction is technical and entirely meaningless. 72 hours. Chairman Jin continues. You end the association cleanly and completely. No contact, no explanation. She simply ceases to be part of your life. In return, we manage the file. It disappears. Sung-ho looks at the photographs on the table, taken from 3 blocks away. On the night, she told him she'd been watching him to see who he was when nothing was at stake. In one of them, they are standing at the corner by the subway entrance. In one of them, his face is turned toward her, and whatever he was feeling that night is completely visible to anyone who knows how to look. He picks that one up. He looks at it. He sets it down. He leaves without answering. He drives back to Manhattan and sits in his car outside the Sterling for 40 minutes without going inside. He thinks about a woman who wires $800 home every month without being asked, who told a drunk man a practical lie and walked away with steady hands. who said I wanted to understand the contradiction like understanding him was worth the time it took. He thinks about what it means to love something enough to protect it from yourself. When he finally goes upstairs, he doesn't sleep. He starts making calls. Not the calls Zara will ever know about. The other ones, quiet, deliberate, the kind that take months to complete and leave no fingerprints. The clock on Chairman Jin's 72 hours begins. Sung-ho has no intention of honoring it. But what he is planning instead will cost him everything he thought he needed and take longer than either of them has been told they have. He stops coming on Wednesday. She notices on the second one, not the first, because people cancel, things happen. The world is not organized around a man's standing reservation at table 7. But the second Wednesday arrives and his chair is empty, and Priya watches Zara check the elevator twice during the lunch rush and says nothing, because there is nothing to say that would help. By the third Wednesday, Zara has stopped checking. She goes home after her shift and sits on the edge of her bed in the small apartment in Flatbush and allows herself exactly 15 minutes to be honest about what she is feeling. What she is feeling is furious. And underneath the fury is something softer that she will not name yet, because naming it would mean admitting how far she let herself go in a direction she told herself not to go. She gets 15 minutes. Then she picks up her nursing textbook and reads until 2 in the morning and gets up at 6 for the clinic. She does this for weeks. The weeks become a month. The month becomes 2. She finishes her clinical hours for the semester. She sits with her overnight patient at the home health agency on Saturday nights, an 83-year-old woman named Lucille who makes her tea and asks questions about her love life with the cheerful relentlessness of someone who has outlived self-consciousness. Zara does not tell Lucille about Sung-ho. She talks about her father's progress, about the nursing board she is preparing for, about whether the branzino at the Sterling is still as good on Tuesdays now that fall has turned to winter. She keeps walking home past the youth center on 34th Street. She does not go in. She is angry at herself for the way she sometimes opens her phone and scrolls without looking for anything specific. But one evening, she finds a small item in a business column. Restructuring in the Korean-American Business Consortium in New York, several senior leadership transitions, a foundation expansion, 3 new community development grants in underserved neighborhoods across Brooklyn and the Bronx. No names. Just movement, quiet and deliberate. The kind that happens when someone with power decides to use it differently and doesn't need credit for it. She reads it twice. She closes her phone. She does not sleep well that night, but not for the same reasons she hasn't been sleeping. Priya asks her one afternoon, during a slow service, what she thinks actually happened. Zara fills salt shakers and considers the question with the honesty she applies to everything. I think he made a choice he believed was protecting me, she says. And I think he was probably right to make it. And I think that doesn't make any of it hurt less. So what are you going to do? Zara lines the salt shakers up even and picks up her tray. Pass my boards, she says, and then figure out the rest. She passes her boards on a Friday in late November. The exam is 4 hours long, and she knows she has passed before they tell her, because she has been preparing for this for 3 years and preparation is the one thing in her life she has never treated casually. She calls her mother. She calls her father, who cries the way men of his generation cry, brief and quiet, and absolutely devastating. She hangs up and stands in the hallway outside the testing center in the cold, thinking about who else she wants to tell. There is only one answer. There has only been one answer for longer than she's been willing to admit. The gala is for the new pediatric wing at Manhattan Central Hospital. Zara is there because her nursing cohort was invited, a gesture from the administration toward the program that supplies their incoming staff. She is wearing the one good dress she owns, deep burgundy, simple, and she is standing near the window at the far end of the room because the space is loud and she has been in social mode since 7 o'clock and the city outside is quiet in a way her nervous system is grateful for. She has been a licensed nurse for 3 weeks. She is thinking about that, about what 3 years of 4 a.m. study sessions and double shifts and wire transfers have actually produced, what it feels like to hold something you built yourself, when the room shifts in a way she recognizes before she sees the cause. A quality of attention redirecting. The way air moves differently in a space when something in it changes. She turns. Sung-ho Park is crossing the room in a dark suit, flanked by no one. No Daniel. No visible security. He moves the way he has always moved, like the space acknowledges him. But something in it is different tonight. He is not performing ownership. He simply occupies the room honestly, the way a man does when he has stopped needing to prove anything to it. He is moving toward her. He stops 2 feet away and looks at her the way he looked at her on the corner by the river in October, when she told him she had been watching him to see who he was when nothing was at stake. Like he is deciding to mean something. You funded this wing, she says. Not a question. The foundation did, he says. Took about 8 months to restructure enough to make it possible. There were some internal transitions that needed to happen first. A pause. 12 of them. She understands what that means. 12 transitions. 12 people moved out of positions they'd held for decades. The kind of quiet dismantling that doesn't make headlines because the people being moved have every reason to stay quiet about it. Chairman Jin's name will never appear in a newspaper, but she understands now that he is no longer where he was. You didn't tell me, she says. I didn't know if you'd come back, he says. And I didn't want you to come back because of what I was building. I wanted, if you came back at all, for it to be something else. Zara looks at him for a long moment. The room moves around them. Glasses, voices, the ordinary sound of people celebrating something good. She has been carrying the shape of this conversation for 3 months without admitting it. You told me I didn't know how to talk to people who aren't afraid of me, he says. You were right. So I spent 8 months becoming someone worth talking to. That's not a small thing, she says. No, he agrees. Neither are you. She exhales, slow, deliberate. There is a version of this moment where she makes him earn it longer, holds the hurt more visibly, lets it cost him something. That version is reasonable. That version is even understandable. But Zara Mitchell did not work 3 jobs and send money home and sit 4-hour board exams to be reasonable about the things that actually matter to her. My father walked 3 blocks without the cane last week, she says. Sung-ho's face does something she has never seen it do. It opens, completely, without armor, without the weight of the room factored in. Tell me about it, he says. So she does. And he listens the way she has always listened to him, without flinching, without performing his reaction, with the full attention of a person who has decided the other one is worth it. They stand at that window until the gala is nearly over. By the time they leave, his coat is around her shoulders and her number is back in his phone, and there is no declaration between them, because they have already said everything that needed saying. In Wednesday conversations over Branzino. In a walkway by the river in October. In 8 months of silence that were never actually empty. She won. Not because she captured him. Because she never once became less of herself in order to keep him. She walked into a room he owned and treated him like a person, and went home to her textbooks when it was time to go home. And somewhere in all of that, he became someone different. Someone who funded a pediatric wing because she made him believe that building something that matters is worth more than holding power over things that don't. That is the win, not the ending. The transformation. If Sung-ho and Zara's story hit you, the stillness in Chapter 2, the no in Chapter 6, the window in Chapter 10, smash that like button and subscribe for more. Drop a comment right now. Which moment got you the most? And tell me who you want next. Daniel Kwan's story, or do we go to Chairman Jin's granddaughter, who just moved back to New York and has no idea what she's walking into? You decide. See you in the next one.